Hi everyone, trying again. Sorry about that, a little tech problem, but now we're back live, broadcasting here from Civic Hall, and today I'm going to be following up on a conversation that we had yesterday that got about 111 responses and 18,000 plus post reach for the video about how your bank is probably ripping you off around holding your check deposits for too long. And I wanted to share with you, because this is what we do at Daily Cloud, empower you with transparency about legislation and laws, so you can own democracy. I wanted to share with you a really important regulation that your bank is probably not telling you about that actually keeps them from holding check deposits longer than they're legally allowed to, thus making a lot of money off of your money when it should be back in your pocket. And let me tell you exactly what I mean. This is something that really I realized was a problem when I was like 24 years old in New Haven, when I was reporting for a local newspaper, and I learned that there's a federal regulation that says that banks really can't hold your money anywhere for longer than 2 business days. And I remembered this because, you know, for the 23 years after that, I would go to, open a checking account in New York or in Washington, D.C. or wherever I was living, and invariably, and it was the big banks, it was little banks, it was Chase, it was Bank of America, it was HSBC, it was actually Amalgamated is the only one that doesn't do this because they're started by unions. But virtually every other bank I've ever banked at, these big mainstream banks, always said to me, I would make a deposit, and I'm a freelancer, a lot of people really need that money, right, as soon as possible. Always the banks would say to me, well, this won't clear for 5 days, or this won't clear for 7 days, or there's a 7-day hold on these funds. Now this may seem like a little nerdy thing to be this worked up about, but I'm actually incredibly excited to be able to disclose this expose about why this is illegal. And again, the reasons that I was given and other people I've talked to, are also given reasons about why the bank has to hold your funds for 5 business days, 6 business days, 7 business days, up to 10 business days I've heard. And a business day, you can imagine, you make the deposit on Friday. They don't count weekends, even though they're often open on Saturday. So then it can be, 9 real-life days before your money ends up in your account, especially if they say, well, you deposited after 2, you deposited after 4, then they don't count that day. So why is this not a trivial little thing? The other thing I noticed is that every time I tried to raise an issue about this, and I said, isn't this illegal? Various, bank managers would say, ha 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 ha, nonsense, or they didn't actually say nonsense because that would be illegal, but they would say things like the only people who ever complain about this are people who bounce checks a lot, like thus, shaming me for caring about when my money would show up in my account and wanting to invoke what I knew to be a federal regulation of some kind that should guarantee that money's in my account by the 3rd business day. Well, why is this not so trivial? Because even though for your individual paycheck or your individual deposit from a client, if you're a freelancer or a contractor, even if it doesn't seem like that much money to wait, that much at stake to wait 5 or 7 business days for your money, what's happening is these giant banks, by telling their customers, oh, you have to wait this exaggerated period of time, they're actually making millions and millions of dollars. If you multiply all those days and all those funds by all those people who are waiting for their money, they actually are making millions of dollars on what's called the float. In other words, they're making money off of your money. And what that means is you don't have, for those extra 3 or 4 days, your money to invest in an IRA, to generate, or a mutual fund, to generate your own extra little bit on that money. So basically, the banks are making illegally money off of your money by telling you some nonsensical reason. The last time I opened an account, I love TD Bank, they're very nice, but when I opened a new checking account, even though I'd been a client there before, they said, well, because it's a new account, we have to hold it for 7 days. And I'm like, but I'm I've been a customer. Didn't matter. So there are all these reasons people hear, and Haley's signaling me.
So Clifford Webb says, name the legislation that makes it illegal.
Absolutely. Hi, Clifford. Clifford has been a community member of ours for years, and I'm really happy to have this chance to talk to you live. So it's not a law, it's a regulation, and it's a Federal Reserve regulation, and it's called Title 12 of, and you can see the full title on the blog, but it's the Haley Federal Reserve regulation on banks and banking. And the actual embed of this PDF is in my blog on the dailyclout.io website, and also Haley's about to put the link in the comments so you can see it for yourself. And what I'm recommending after you see my little presentation proving that I'm right, is I'm recommending that you print this regulation out from the PDF that we're sharing with you, laminate it, go to Kinko's, laminate that guy, and take it with you to the bank, because your bank is supposed to post this information by law, and it's supposed to be posted in a visible place so people know that the bank can't hold their funds after they've made a deposit more than these limited amounts of time. Again, I really like the nice people at my TD Bank, but when I asked where the posting was of these regulations, they referred me to a poster that was like literally behind a pillar. Like, see these pillars here at Civic Hall? You probably can't see them. It was like literally behind a pillar in the darkest, furthest corner at the absolute furthest point in the bank from where any customer would have any reason to look in any way whatsoever. Virtually, totally missable, whereas it's supposed to be, right there visibly displayed. So, and again, I don't mean to single out TD Bank. Other banks are, much, much worse. So, what this is a nice graphic that Haley made that we'll post based on a link produced by Wallet Hub. Is that correct? That's the original citation. And we're crediting them. They did a good job. So, real caution when you look online, how long can the banks hold my money? A lot of this content is actually generated by the industry, right? Generated by bankers. So there's a lot of what you'd call weasel words in a lot of these links online. But this is true, and it's based on the regulation by the Federal Reserve. And this says that no, in fact, they can't hold your money. It is illegal. If you're depositing cash, if you do it in person to an employee at any time of the day, right? None of this nonsensical, you came in after noon, you came in after 2, like we've had a siesta and you missed it. It has to be available to you that same day or the next day, right? It's the second business day if you do it through the ATM, and if you do it at some other non-bank ATM, it is the 5th business day. But if you go right in and give them cash, they have to put it right in your account, and you have to be able to get it right then using your debit card or your ATM card. If it's an electronic deposit or transfer, and a lot of people these days are paid that way, a lot of people who are on salaries, right? Like I was a visiting professor at Stony Brook, so that was an electronic deposit into my account. That's true of everyone who works for the government, as a professor does in New York State. My bank used to say, yes, there's an electronic deposit, but you don't have access to it for another day and a half, right? But in fact, if you get it, you're supposed to get it, access to the money that same day or the next day, right? And if the payment is received later, it's the second business day after that. So, when my employer said we wired you the money, there shouldn't be this redonkulous 2.5 day hold. I get this, by the way, as a freelancer. I get this from News Corps. I get it from, various people who are sending me money in exchange for writing articles. And there's always this crazy hold. And I'm like, it's electronic, it's instantaneous. Why can't I just have the money when it arrives in my bank? So whenever a bank says you can't have your wire transfer yet, if they get it that day, you should get it the same day or the next day to use your money, not theirs. Non-government checks, if it's deposited in person to an employee, you should get it the next business day, right? In other words, if Haley writes me a check, or, some random person here writes me a check, and they're not the government, I still should get it the next business day if I deposit it in person to an employee. Yes, we have a question.
So Haley Pearson says she really enjoyed The Beauty Myth, and she wants to know what books you'd recommend to learn more about politics.
So I would love to speak to that. I promise I will. I just want to get through my rant about banking because I have ADD. So if I don't get through my rant about banking, I'll be distracted. But I promise to circle back to Haley at the end. Government checks. If you get a government check, if you work, in any way for the government, none of this nonsensical 5 business days, 3 business days. If you deposit it in person, you should get your money the next business day. And if you do it at an ATM, second business day. So there's a huge difference between depositing your money to a human being versus at an ATM. Banks want to push you to do your banking electronically. It's cheaper for them. But guess what? What they don't say is not only do they save money on, salaries, insurance, workman's comp, and overhead, they get to keep your money longer and make money off of it if they can lure you into making an ATM deposit instead of walking in the old-fashioned way. And of course, it's up to you. But you deserve to know that even if you do it in the ATM, you should get your money in 2 business days. If the check is drawn on us, on an account that's right there in the bank, in person, same day, next business day. I think I'm making my point. Non-next day regular checks for more than $200. So you should get $200 the next business day if you do it in person to an employee. And if you do it at an ATM, you should still get $200, and then the rest should clear on the second business day. I've had sometimes, because I'm a freelancer, or I write books, I don't get a regular salary. So I'll get chunks of money, and sometimes there'll be more than $5,000, which is the magical number that a lot of banks I've banked at have said, oh no, look at this check, it's for more than $5,000. We can't possibly clear it for, 7 business days, 10 business days. It is legally due to me and to you on the remainder. The remainder is due on the second business day, no matter how much more than $200 it's for. If you deposit it remotely, should be available the next day or the second business day. But if you use a mobile app, immediately, it should be available immediately, right? That's your money. And there can be a hold on a new account. Remember I said TD Bank? Again, I love my local branch. They're very adorable people, but they held my check when I opened an account for 7 business days. This says no, no, no. The first $5,000 of checks have to be available the next day, and the remainder on the 9th business day. So the first 5,000 should have been available, right? And again, those are not ordinary checks for I don't get those checks that often, but by law, TD Bank should have said, oh, here you go, have that 5,000 of whatever you deposit in a new account the next day, not asking me to wait or demanding that I wait 7 business days. Large deposits, if it's more than 5,000, you should get it the first 5,000 on the second business day and remainder by the 7th. And if it's a redeposited check, you get it on the 7th. And if these are unusual situations where if there's a lot of overdraft, etc., there are longer holds, you can take a look. But that is my presentation. The bottom line is, have I just lost? Am I still okay? Okay. The bottom line is that if your bank doesn't hand over your money in your account by either immediately or the next business day or at the latest 2 business days, unless there are very, very unusual circumstances, they're doing something that's against the law. And this is happening over and over and over across the country. It's one thing for people who are relatively privileged. It's extremely annoying, and no one, including me, can spare those extra amounts that the bank is taking. But for people who are working, as many Americans are, paycheck to paycheck, who really need that money to pay a child care bill, to keep the lights on, to get food for their children, I think this is unconscionable. Yes, and someone has a question.
Penny Bacchusito says, isn't the 5K limit due to the Patriot Act?
Isn't the 5K limit due to the Patriot Act? I don't know the answer to that. We can look into it, and I encourage all of the audience also to look into it because it's a crowdsourcing kind of project, Daily Clout. I do know that the Patriot Act has been used to justify a lot of changes in bank regulations. I didn't see any mention of the Patriot Act, but even so, as you'll see in the chart, the 5,000 is even over 5,000. It's pretty quick. It's supposed to be pretty quickly made available to you. Yeah.
So Haley Pearson, who asked about reading materials, says she is also interested in historical documents and rather than interpretation wants to look at first-hand sources. What would you recommend to her?
Well, that's a great question. I encourage everyone to look at first-hand sources. I mean, one thing I'd encourage her to do, and I don't mean to be like a legislation nerd, is to play with BillCam on Daily Cloud's website, because she can look at the first-hand text of any bill at the state level. What state does she live in? Is she willing to say?
What state? Her name is Haley Pearson.
Haley Pearson. What state, Haley Pearson, do you live in, if you're willing to say? You don't have to. You know what? For security reasons, you don't have to tell us. But any state you're interested in, just enter that state and the subject you're interested in, like women's issues. If you're interested in the beauty myth, and women's National Women's Day is coming up, or International Women's Day. California, just like where I came from. So California is a really interesting state to look at the legislation, because California is a referendum state. And one of the bills I'd encourage you to look at is one that our Haley Snyder, wrote about. It was a bill that took the taxes off of tampons. It was proposed by Cristina Garcia, a California assemblywoman in a low-income constituency. Her constituents had trouble, paying for menstrual care supplies, and she introduced this great bill that made it cheaper for women to pay for what is a necessity, not a luxury. And then 16 other states presented copycat bills, and the EU also presented a copycat bill, because I would say because Haley's piece about it in the Huffington Post went so viral and shone a light on it. But definitely look at that. What other original sources? I mean, this is a really good question. If you go to our Facebook page, the Naomi Wolf Facebook page, and also I think the Daily Cloud Facebook page, there are guidelines for writing op-eds, because we're encouraging all of you to write your op-eds and your essays and your blog posts and videos and send them to us about what's going on in your community, issues you care about. So go ahead and look there, because we also identify what's a good source and what's not a good source. No sourcing is perfect these days, but some are better than others, and you are absolutely right that first-hand sources are the best sources. Yeah, and thanks for the question.
So Penny Backstow says, I was penalized for making 2 deposits over the 5K and threatened to close the ACCT if I didn't answer the questions and where the funds came from. This is why I asked on the Patriot Act.
Oh, wow, Penny. Did everyone hear the question or the comment?
You should repeat it.
All right, so Haley Snyder just said that Penny, what's her last name? Backstow was penalized by her bank when she made 2 deposits totaling more than $5,000 and didn't want to answer the question from the bank, where did the funds come from? And that's why she asked about the Patriot Act. Wow, that is a really, really good question. And it's actually ringing sort of a bell. That's a really great question. I do know that there are New York regulations, or relatively new post-Patriot Act, about intended to check money laundering and terrorism. I do think it's incredibly intrusive to ask about where funds come from. I would say that it violates the Fourth Amendment, which, because it is, in my view, an unreasonable form of search and seizure, and that they should need a warrant to ask you about that. But Haley's researching this right now, and unless we can answer this in the next few minutes, we'll be sure to post the answer on the Daily Cloud IO blog when we know more about it. When you say penalized, Haley, I'm asking Penny a follow-up question. Penny, when you say you were penalized, what happened? They made you close the account, or they charged you money? What did they do when...
She says the bank was PNC.
Oh, the bank was PNC, okay. And what was the penalty? We're just waiting for Penny to let us know what the penalty was. Okay, so the USA Patriot Act, so this is the answer. Section 325 of the USA Patriot Act requires all financial institutions to obtain, verify, and record information that identifies each person who opens an account, okay, or changes an existing account. This federal requirement applies to all new customers and current customers. What this means to you when you open an account or change an existing account, we will ask each person for their name, physical address, mailing address, date of birth, and other information that will allow us to identify them. We will ask to see each person's driver's license and other identifying documents and copy or record information from each of them. But it doesn't say anything about amounts of money over $5,000. So we'll look more into that. But did she say what the penalty was?
She said they threatened to close the account if she didn't answer the question.
They threatened to close the account if she didn't answer the question. Wow. Did she answer the question, or did she choose to bank elsewhere? I mean, I guess what I want to say
She says, I have had an account with them for over 20 years.
I have had an account with them for over 20 years. Wow. That's extraordinary. I mean, I guess what I would say is, in general, this kind of intrusive questioning, I know that it's justified in the name of national security, but there are already avenues before the Patriot Act to allow the government to investigate with a warrant suspicious activity or money laundering or, funds going to terrorism. So my worry is that this kind of very broad inquiry about where did you get this money from is another way of creating less and less privacy for people. So here is what Haley has found, and this is compliance. The Bank Secrecy Act is what probably led to that question to you, Penny. And this says reports of suspicious activities, and we can post this online. This regulation requires every national bank to file a suspicious activity report, SAR, when they detect certain known or suspected violations of federal law or suspicious transactions related to a money laundering activity or violation of the BSA. An SAR filing is required for any potential crimes. One, involving insider abuse, regardless of the dollar amount. What is that, I wonder? Two, when there is an identifiable suspect and the transaction involves $5,000 or more. And three, when there is no identifiable suspect and the transaction involves $25,000 or more. An SAR filing also is required in the case of suspicious activity that is indicative of potential money laundering or BSA violations and the transaction involves $5,000 or more. Wow. Well, I guess that this is pretty alarming. I guess that I don't want to ask further questions about you personally, Penny, because I want to protect your privacy. But I would bet if these requests were transparent metadata, we'd see more profiling of this kind among people, perhaps with Muslim-related names. I mean, what is insider abuse? What is an identifiable suspect? In the case of suspicious activity that is indicative of potential money laundering or BSA violations. And BSA is what? And the transaction involves $5,000 or more. What is the BSA? Bank Secrecy Act. So basically, this is exactly the kind of legislation that's really scary to me because it's so opaque, right? Like it basically says the bank can ask you these questions or file a report on your activity if it's more than $5,000, even when there's no reason to suspect you of anything, which doubtless there isn't, Penny. But there's a potential BSA violation. But what is a BSA violation? Bank Secrecy Act violation. So I don't know what triggers this, but I think that at the very least, in a healthy democracy, we should all be able to answer that question. I should be able to say to you, when you get these questions from your bank, this is what triggered it. And there should also be a FOIA, possibility so that you can say, wait a minute, you're asking me all these intrusive questions about where I got this $5,000. Show me what triggered your asking me these questions, right? That's what I believe. And that's what I believe the Fourth Amendment guarantees. So thank you, Penny, for calling this to our attention. Yeah.
So we have a comment from Autumn Smith. She says,
Autumn, hi!
Citizen journalist Autumn
Oh,
Smith.
Autumn, I'm so excited to hear you and see you.
She says, I'm aware of banks closing business accounts if they disagree with what you are selling, yet they will still accept the money if they make off credit.
If they make off credit?
I think she's saying if they make money off of like credit transactions.
Oh, wow. So first, I really want to do a huge shout out. Like, I appreciate every single member of our community, and I just adore each and every one of you. And I just also want to say, like, we've been talking about U.S. legislation, but we're really intending to cover the rest of the world. And if you want to bring us issues to pay attention to globally, we're here for that. I don't want to leave out the very big element of our community that's international. But Autumn Smith deserves a huge shout out. She's a citizen journalist in Michigan, and she is amazing. She's one of the most talented citizen journalists I've ever encountered, and she personally uncovered all kinds of corruption. I don't think I'm going off the off base in identifying this in her local government, and actually took quite a bit of heat as a result of her courage in doing so. So Autumn is my personal role model because she really shows that this is what Daily Clout's mission is, to amplify these voices. Anyone, anywhere. You don't have to have some arcane education. You don't have to be an insider. You don't have to be a member of the global or national elite. You can be a smart person from any walk of life, with any amount of background or any amount of education, and with dedication, tenacity, and the tools we're giving you, you can really be a leader in, being a citizen reporter, citizen legislator, citizen campaigner, citizen lobbyist, all the things we're here to help you do. So hooray, Autumn. And pay attention to everything she writes. And Autumn, please send us your stuff now.
And, she added, and I'm reading her comment, be prosecuted twice, abscess just acquired on February 17th.
She was prosecuted twice? And be prosecuted twice and...
Abscess just acquired on February 17th.
So I'm sorry that she... Autumn, I'm sorry that you're going through such...
Two First Amendment retaliation charges against me.
Good heavens.
Acquitted on February 17th.
Oh, she was acquitted on February 17th, thank God. Wow, all right. Well, there's a lot you've faced, Autumn. I'm sorry about that, but thank you for your continued reporting. And so the question is it true, and she's experienced this or researched it, that some banks close accounts if they don't agree with what you're selling? So obviously if you're selling something illegal, like medical marijuana in a state where it's not legal to sell it, I'm sure there's regulations that say the bank can close your account. I mean, that's why I think there's, legitimate, if there's legitimate warranted suspicion of money laundering or drug trafficking, etc., obviously that can be cause to close someone's account. But as I was saying, there are already avenues to get a warrant from a magistrate to investigate those accounts. We don't need the Patriot Act asking everyone who deposited over $5,000, where they got the money from. I do know, look at PayPal, right? Let's see what happened first. When WikiLeaks released a lot of information that the US government didn't love having out in public, I believe it was PayPal that stopped processing donations to WikiLeaks. So PayPal isn't a bank, so that's maybe not a good example. I'm not aware of banks closing accounts because they don't agree with what the account holders are selling, politically. There is something around banks I am more concerned about, or that I know more about, Autumn, and it's the following, and I wrote about this for The Guardian. When you walk into a lot of major banks in New York City, you'll see a New York City police officer standing inside the bank, doing guard duty. This is true at TD Bank, it's true at HSBC, I believe, it's true at, I've seen it at a bunch of different banks, all big banks, Chase, I believe. So this worries me. I did a little investigating, and there's a program that these big banks have set up with the city of New York to hire New York City police officers on overtime to pay them so that the police officers make more money moonlighting for the banks. So police officers work very hard. They don't get paid enough. If they want to moonlight, I think that's fine. but it is very disturbing to me, especially after I witnessed Occupy Wall Street in 2011, 2012, and people were protesting the banks, right? And there were violent crackdowns on those protesters. It was worrying to me to see a program that is public-private, right? Partnership, right? Like, our New York City government should be transparent and accountable, and if it has a deal with big banks here in New York to hire our police officers that our taxpayers are paying, right, and wearing their uniform. It wasn't like, I'm not in uniform, it's on my own time. They're wearing their New York City police officer uniform, all of their technology, that they're using, their walkie-talkies, their radios, their weapons are paid for by us, but they're inside the banks, right? What's that going to do the next time there's a citizens' protest at a bank or about a bank? Or what's it going to do if there's a sit-in, outside of a bank? Or what does it do whenever there's a conflict between the citizens of New York City and banks or, assembly? I mean, I was watching those protests against banks in New York City, and there was a much more violent police crackdown against those protests than many protests since, like union protests or the Women's March, right? There wasn't a police crackdown. So I have to ask, it's disturbing, these public-private partnerships, and that there's no oversight of or accountability. And again, why are our tax dollars being used to put our, men and women in uniform inside a private company? And where does that end? Like, should we hand them over to Exxon? Should we hand them over to Google? Should we hand them over to, Barney's of New York? There are police officers. And what does it mean to be able to buy or rent a police officer? It's very disturbing if you believe in the independence of municipal policing, which is part of our democracy. Are there other questions? Okay, so that's our riff today, or my riff, about how to keep your money from being, misused or illegally used by your bank. Thank you for bearing with my nerdy attention to this regulation. I've been waiting like 24 years to be able to show people, look, I'm not crazy. They really don't have the right to keep your money more than 2 business days, in only some cases, even then. Please take your laminated version of this regulation to your bank. If they give you a hard time, talk to the bank manager. If he or she still gives you a hard time, report back to Daily Clout, because this is the way citizens have pushback. And are not just passive recipients of big business or big government squishing them, right? You have a right to legal protection. You have a right to report on a public forum if someone's not following the regulations that regulate their industry. And we're here to be your voice, as President Trump likes to say, we too are here to be your voice. And there's one other thing I want to say. Yes, Haley?
Haley Pearson says, when is the next time we can come see you talk?
When is the next time you can come see me talk? Haley Pearson, you can see me talk tomorrow. Because we're doing these updates every day. Every day I'm going to be looking at the news or looking at something that crossed our desk at Daily Clout and answering your questions, being available to you. And again, you're not passive recipients of what we're sharing with you. This is your forum. So if there's something you want us to look at, bring it to our attention. A couple of you have brought up very important things like banking regulations, and we can send us a blog. But also if there's something you want us to research and address, send that question to us or that request to Haley Snyder at dailyclout.io. Is Haley at dailyclout, Haley, or Haley at dailyclout.io. Now, I have some really exciting news. Daily Clout is going to the Senate on Monday. We've been invited to meet with a couple of Senate staffers. I'm not going to name them yet until more is confirmed. But it's so exciting for us because, as you know, we started out this tiny little beta, tiny little startup, and now elected officials are coming to us and their communications directors are coming to us because we're able to bring your concerns directly to them without gatekeepers, and also we're able to bring their words and their responses directly to you. And that's the way it should work in a democracy. That's a really big day. And it's really big for us, and I just want to thank you so much, the Daily Clout community members all around the world, not just in the United States. I promise, as soon as we can build your database, India, Italy, Britain, because none of these have interactive legislative databases like the one we built for the United States, we'll build them. And very soon, also, I want to tell you, we're launching our membership capability and also contributor capability. So even though I would love to do all of this without asking you to help us, bring you this research, these tools, these updates. It does cost money for us to build this technology, to make it better, to bring it to you, to troubleshoot it. We like to pay our young bloggers, even though not nearly as much as we want to. We have staffers like Haley who deserve a living wage, and we really need your support in order to ramp up our reporting on local legislation, our looking into the issues that you care about, our reporting on federal legislation, and are creating tools that let you, again, dailyclout.io, interact with the bill cam, search live legislation, share it through social media. You are the leader of your democracy. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.